Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's case is going to be a solved true crime case which was named in the media as the Sheffield Incest Case. I'd just like to let you know that I've gathered all of my information off the internet. I don't mean any disrespect to anyone I'm going to speak about today, and this video was made for educational purposes. Now, today's case is slightly different to the normal ones because the police haven't actually issued any of the people involved names. So there were two daughters involved and their names were never released, and this was to protect them. The man who was convicted, his name was also never released. This kind of allowed the family to move on after all of the torture and everything that they suffered, to enable them to have a new life and things like that. They didn't want the story in the media. They didn't want people to know who they were, the children. They wanted to be able to have a normal life after all of this had happened. And as a result of that, the police didn't release anything. They wanted to kind of stay off the grid and out of the media, which is completely understandable, especially when I'll get into the details of the case and you realise just what happened to them. So this case, again, not much information was released, which means that there were never any photos released. There was basically nothing. So obviously I haven't been able to include it in this video for you guys, so I do apologise about that, but the reasons behind it are more than justified. Like in the same case as Elizabeth Fritzl, she had to change her name. She relocated with her children. She was under armed guard for protection, just so she could gain a bit of normality to life. And this is why this family's names were never released. This family lived in Sheffield in England, and this man began abusing his two daughters from quite an early age. The mother actually did leave because she herself had suffered so much abuse from this man, and within the time that they were married, she just couldn't put up with it anymore. She just had to get out of there, and that's what she did. The abuse began in 1980 and would continue for around about 25 years. This man was described as an English businessman, and that is pretty much all we know about him, apart from what he did to his daughters. So basically, this man, to try and avoid detection and avoid anybody really noticing anything going on, he would relocate and move his family so much. And he would also say, I don't know, he'd cause a bruise, a visual bruise on their face or their arms or something like that. He would actually keep them away from school. He wouldn't let them attend. He'd keep them isolated, so basically no one would notice. He did everything he could to keep them isolated and basically just hide them away from the world, to hide what he was doing to them. From what I could find, the sexual assault actually started when one of the daughters was 8 and the other one was 10 years old. How awful is it that these girls had to endure this for so long and from such a young age? It's just so sad. He would call their names in the night and sexually abuse them daily. And this was mental as well as physical. He would do things like smear blood on the walls in the middle of the night just to mess with their heads. He was such a controlling man, and he just wanted to put the sheer fear into them, basically to make sure that they would never tell anyone of what he was doing to them. And it's just so horrible. He would do things like forcing their head into a gas fire, basically holding it there and telling them that if they moved, they would burn themselves. They must have been so scared to have their own father, the person that brought them up, that should love them unconditionally and protect them, forcing the face into a fire and threatening them with a naked flame. Just really awful to even think about. Again, he'd do everything in his power to keep them under his control and to keep them terrified of him, so that they would never ever tell anyone of what was going on. And as the girls grew older, they eventually became fertile, but his sexual abuse didn't stop. Now, the girls were quite smart on that front. They did try and take measures to try and prevent themselves from becoming pregnant. Obviously, this would have been incest. This was their own father. They didn't want to become pregnant towards him, so they would take things like the pill. But he would simply tell them not to do, and they were that frightened of him. They didn't know what he would do. do, they listened to him and they stopped taking it. They were absolutely terrified of him, so of course you would stop, because otherwise you just don't know what to do. And because they stopped taking the pill, this did result in as much as 19 pregnancies between the two girls. 5 of these pregnancies were actually miscarriages. 5 of them were terminations. 2 of the children unfortunately died shortly after being born, but 7 of the children actually survived, and this kind of just gave their father more power over his daughters. Now he had even more leverage, because of course they're the mothers, they wanted to protect the children, they would do anything for them. He would threaten them all if they ever even talked about their abuse to anyone. I've also seen that he did also sexually assault one of their children too, but the girls would do everything they could to try and protect their children against him. But at the end of the day, they were basically under his thumb. He was their father, and until they were old enough to actually get out from under him, move out, or even brave enough to tell someone, there was nothing much they could do. They would do things like pay him £100 a month and ply him with whiskey just to try and keep him off their children. And as much as they tried, it really didn't work. He just kept abusing the girls and the children. At one point, they did actually try to contact Childline. And when the person on the other end of the phone couldn't confirm that the girls' children wouldn't be taken away from them, they actually ended the call. And that to me is just torture. They finally got the courage to tell someone, they rang someone, and the person on the other end of the phone couldn't even confirm that the children would stay with them. So obviously they love their children, they're not going to want them to be taken off them. So terrified, they just put the phone down. They had endured and endured, and in the end it did turn out to be 25 years. There were even reports of abuse, but no action was ever taken. They ended up going to hospitals and things to have their children and whatnot, but they were just too scared to tell the hospital staff about their father abusing them. Even with injuries and things like that, nothing was ever done. Family members did report their concerns to the authorities for 20 years, and still nothing was actually done. Social workers even stated that because their father moved around a lot, the girls didn't really have the chance to kind of get that relationship with somebody and get close enough to somebody to tell them what was going on. The family were even known to social services in Lincolnshire and South Yorkshire, but the abuse was never recognised. Even a family doctor failed to report abuse in 2008, and he was actually suspended. So as you can see, these girls were failed by a lot of people. Even their teachers did notice injuries, but they just put it down to being bullied. It really does break my heart that these were the signs that were right there for everyone to see, and all these people in places of power and somebody that could have done something never actually did. And the girls did actually try and tell some people, but these, again, the Childline phone call, but this didn't really pan out, and nothing was really looked into any further. If someone just took a little bit of time to look into them and maybe even see the fear in their eyes, because these girls were not happy. Apart from the children, which obviously would have brought them joy and gave them a bit more to live for, they were living a miserable existence. Maybe a lot of this could have been prevented if someone had just seen something and said something. If the children if the person on the phone Childline would have said that they could have kept their children, because the girls had done nothing wrong, they were being abused by the father. Why would the children be taken away from them? Because they were being abused by the father. It's not their fault. They tried everything to protect them, but this person wouldn't confirm that they wouldn't be taken away, and therefore, even when they tried to report it, they obviously got frightened because of this and didn't do it. And I'm pretty sure that if the person would have said that they could have kept their children, or at least even found out more information about it, then it could have probably been stopped a lot sooner. It really is heartbreaking, and all we can do is hope that the family did find a way to move on with their lives free from their father's terror. Now, obviously they're going to have scars and they'll never forget what happened to them, but I just hope that they can actually lead a happy life and move away from that hell that they lived through. They deserve to be happy. They deserve to start a new life free from the abuse that they endured. The girls eventually were able to build relationships with the partners, and this gave them the strength and the courage to be able to report the father for what he'd done, and he was actually put behind bars for his atrocities. Although the father, of course, denied the crimes initially, many people do, they did DNA testing on the girls' children and it was confirmed that he was their father. The women actually said that while his imprisonment gave them the knowledge that he couldn't physically touch them again, the suffering that he had caused would continue for many years, and they now had to concentrate on finding the strength and rebuilding their lives. The actual courage that it must have taken to put their faith and trust in someone after being failed by so many people is quite remarkable. And not just that, the world around us can actually learn from these kind of cases and try to put things in place to help prevent things like this happening in the future. After this case and a similar one that happened in 2003 in Swindon, independent inquiries were actually set up to examine how these kind of cases were dealt with by the local authorities, by hospitals, and even by child help agencies. So as awful and terrible as these cases are, they can actually bring some good out of it and help improve the way things are done to deal with such atrocities to hopefully prevent them happening again. Their father was actually arrested in November 2008. He was 54 years old at the time, and apparently he was unrepentant and had no remorse for everything that he'd done. When he was finally charged, he received 25 concurrent life sentences and had to serve a minimum of 14.5 years in jail. Personally, I really do admire the strength it must have taken after suffering for so long to finally free themselves of the father's abuse and actually tell somebody what had happened. And again, after he was arrested, that they were able to rebuild their lives with their children and start again and just have such a good life, which was taken away from them. Their childhood was taken away from them. They weren't able to be a normal child and do what normal children do. They had to endure so much suffering. If you guys have any cases that you'd like me to look into, please do let me know and I will look into them for you. If you're new to the channel and would like to see similar content, please do subscribe and like this video. But anyway guys, that's all I have today on the Sheffield Incest case. Thank you so much for watching and until next time, bye!